This
Screen.
conference will now be recorded.
Awesome.
Got it.
Okay. So let's see. I'm just going to exit out. I'm going to get into screen share mode here. All right, can people only see to the top of the order here? People can see my PowerPoint? I think it's kind of loading for everyone.
Yep, I can see it.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. There we go. Now we're cooking with oil, I think. We got full screen capacity. Okay, awesome. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you again for your time. I know it is 4 o'clock on your Monday and you've made it. You're almost there, and I promise the next part of the hour is going to be super valuable to you guys. And I want to make sure also within the presentation, if there's any questions, either type it in the chat and someone can shout out that there's chats going on, or feel free to unmute yourself and rock and roll that way. Otherwise, I'm going to get rolling. So today we're going to dive into all things Argentina and Chile. And when I was talking to Fritz about this meeting, he was saying how many wine nerds there are in your group, which is awesome. When I have the ability to really get nerdy and deep about these categories, it honestly is the most fun, because we collectively kind of have this aha moment of how much there is to talk about in Chile and Argentina today for winemaking. So that's really my intention today, is to get you guys fired up about all the different things that are going on, how this fits into your wine world in the market, and really how these stories can fuel you to be more successful in the market with these wines. That's ultimately all of our goals, right? To connect those two things. So that is the intention for the presentation today. And kind of we have three major pieces of the presentation. One, I don't think you can really go deep into any wine country without understanding the wine map. So we're going to talk a lot about the maps of both Chile and Argentina, their latest appellation systems, what that means for the bottles of wines we're taking out in the market. Kind of the core of the presentation will be all about the three major storylines that are happening across the Andes, which really helps categorize how you talk about certain wines that you take out in the market. And then within all of that, we're going to be talking a lot about sales strategy and how you position these wines with all of this information when you're with buyers. So that's really the core of what we're doing today. And you're going to see a lot of graphics in the presentation. As you've seen, obviously, with our sake portfolio, we are very, very full of all different educational materials. And we honestly pride ourselves a lot in what we're able to create for the market. We have an unbelievable in-house graphic design team, in-house marketing team that can make anything come to life. If you can think of it, we can create it. So this is just a visual of showing exactly where on our website you can find all of these trade tools. Upper right-hand corner, click trade tools, and you'll have kind of a mosaic board of all the categories of POS that we have. Shelf talkers, recipe cards, infographics, master guides, maps, etc. Especially today, we are even more so ramped up on our social media. So all of our handles are at the bottom of the page there. So please be sure to check that out as well. This is just a snapshot of our core brands. This is always just helpful to center people of really what our usual focus is in the market. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of different brands and how they fit into these themes. But just as a reminder, for Argentina, we have Casa Lorena and Arena, Luca and La Posta, and then for Chile, we have Boya and Casa Silva. And we'll be talking a lot about those wines as well. Okay, so for our first part of our journey, we're going to be talking all about place, and we're going to be talking about maps and geography, appellation, and geology. And if we are all wine nerds, that's what makes us the most excited. So I would say that the major takeaway for talking about Chile and Argentina today is that everything ultimately comes back to the Andes Mountains. These wines are mountain wines at the end of the day, because the Andes mountain range is what divides the border between Argentina, specifically Mendoza, and Chile. This tectonic plate activity that pushed up the Andes Mountains affects everything from climate to landscape to irrigation and water source in these countries, and especially all of the different climatic factors that happens during a harvest. So again, the more we focus on the mountains, the more we can start to understand both sides of the Andes for Chile and Argentina. And it's kind of amazing to me how much this hasn't been a focus in a lot of wine education for these countries. I think they've been very simplified in many different publications, and really now's the time to get detailed because the wines are now aligning with that detail, which is really inspiring. So mountain wines is what we're going to be focusing on today. This is, of course, a classic aerial map of both Argentina and Chile, just to give us a start visual as we get more detailed going closer to the map. So we have Argentina to the east, of course, going all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. And then we have the spine of the Andes that is the natural border between Chile to the west and Argentina to the east. Argentina clearly is a much bigger country, but as you can see, the majority of its wine regions are actually tucked up against the foothills of the Andes Mountains, from Salta, Mendoza, and then parts of Patagonia. The Atlantic region in green is a more recently explored area, which is an exciting topic for another kind of deep dive later on. But for our portfolio specifically, we'll really be focusing on Mendoza, because 99.9% of our wines are from Mendoza, save for one Torontés that we have from Salta. And then we hop on the Chilean side, you obviously see it's a very long, very skinny country that you'll be amazed by how diverse this wine region is, with all of its extreme viticulture that you can have even in a very skinny country at the end of the earth. So that's our major orientation. This is now zooming in closer, specifically on, for scale here, this would be Mendoza here. Mendoza as a province is pretty much like the size of the state of Illinois. And for this region here, we're zooming specifically on two regions within the Mendoza province, which are Luján de Cuyo and the Elqui Valley. We're going to start in the Chilean side though, so we can get a little bit of context and orientation there. So we're going to zoom into Chile. Kind of the 101, like if you had two sentences to say about this map of Chile, two things. One, this is the middle third of the country. So the middle third of the country is where the most updated appellation limits go. So any farther north you're going to go on this map, you're going into the driest desert in the world, which is the Atacama Desert. And any farther south, you're going to go into the Lake District and the glaciers of Patagonia. But this map is alive. So Chileans are still exploring actually their limits north to south as well as east to west. But you can generally give that context that this is the middle third. The second element of context is that really you can think of this map like our west coast of the United States, but flipped upside down. Because we're now south of the equator, as you go farther south, it's actually cooler with more rainfall. And as you go farther north, it's drier and more arid. And literally when you break down the delta of the latitude between the northernmost region and the southernmost region, it is the exact same delta as our west coast of the US. And again, because we're all nerds here, I can really dive even deeper that I was so determined one night, because after living in Chile and now living in California, I see so many parallels to their landscape and their wine regions and their wine history. I like nerdily did the math one night. And so I made this whole graphic where you basically compare the two sets of deltas of latitude between areas in Chile and areas in the US on the West Coast. And you can flip them upside down. So the image to the left is Chile upside down with its delta of wine regions. And then it fits right up against the actual delta of the West Coast. the image to the right is kind of the majority of Chilean wine regions is in that core, and that's the exact same delta as the actual state of California. So whoever wants to dive deeper into that, I'm happy to, but it's really fun to get an actual visual to the comparison as well. I think another main piece to take away is that when you think of Chilean wine regions, this country of Chile is essentially the width of the United States. So it's an incredible distance of diversity of climate as you go north to south. But when you're thinking of Chilean wine, I actually want you to think of diversity going east to west, because the width of Chile is an average of 120 miles, but in a very short distance, you're being condensed between a coastal climate to a mid-valley, and then you hit the wall of the Andes Mountains, which is the second highest mountain range in the world, second to the Himalayas. So that's a lot of change in a small space. And so you actually want to think of Chilean terroir as north-south and east-west, because in one valley, you can have very different terroirs if you're going on that plane. So think of it like a terroir matrix, if you will. So we'll dive a little deeper into that as we talk about different themes. But even with that sort of orientation and context, the map of Chile just comes much more to life. Instead of looking at it and thinking, these are all words that don't mean anything to me, and I don't know what else I can say about the map of Chile. So that's really a 101 there. This is just another image, and again, I think we have so much to say about the geology of the Andes Mountains. But this is an image I wanted to put together because so many people were curious of, you know, why does this wine in Chile do so well in this area, or this varietal do so well in this area? And when you start breaking down the mosaic of geology that's along the spine of the Andes, you'll find all different types of rock. So for example, some of the most steely, austere, amazing, ageable Chardonnays come from the desert of Chile. And you think, how could that be so? Super dry, arid climate. One, in the nighttime in a desert, there's no humidity, so it cools way down. The diurnal shift is huge. So it keeps them a really cool temperature at night, which moderates its maturity. The second piece is that this northern area of Chile was a major deposit area for when the ocean receded and the mountains came up. Lots of seashells were deposited there. So if you dig a soil hole in the north of Chile, you are literally, and you kind of blocked out the cactus that's all around you, you're essentially looking at Kimmeridgian clay, like Chablis. So you plant Chardonnay there and it thrives and it has this unbelievable quality. So this gives, again, a little more context and life to what winemaking in the Andes really feels like. So that's our soil nerd map there. This is an image that I was tirelessly kept drawing this kind of with buyers on napkins or sales sheets or case stacks, because many people couldn't have a 3D topography kind of visual of Chile and Argentina and how they relate to each other. One of my intentions was to really show this coastal mountain range that's in Chile. Many people kind of thought that the map of Chile looked like this if you couldn't in the cross section. This was actually the original Chile that came out of the ocean, and over thousands of years it's degraded down, and then the Andes was formed. So the Andes is actually a younger mountain range than this coastal range, which again, if you think of like California, think of the hills of Sonoma, the Central Valley, and then the Sierras. Very similar, just again, more extreme. So this really influences what coastal wine means, and this obviously really influences what high elevation wines mean. Second intention here was really to show the difference of climate between Chile and Argentina. You obviously have a huge Mediterranean influence in climate from the Pacific Ocean on Chile. All that moisture hits the wall of the Andes and you have a rain shadow on the other side. So that's why Mendoza is a desert. It's also why, as you go farther south in Chile, you can actually dry farm. You cannot dry farm in Mendoza. Everything is irrigated from snowmelt off of the Andes, including humans and including other agriculture outside of just wine. So that's a hugely important part of their winemaking history and culture, and really sustainability into the future. It all depends on rainfall in the Andes Mountains for snowmelt. So that is our transition over to Mendoza. This is just a visual of what some of those canals start to look like when you're up in the Andes Mountains. these rivers all channel down to the valley and then are dispersed to different vineyard sites, originally built by the Huarpe Indians, which was the original native culture of Mendoza. And so this is Mendoza now zoomed in. So for the sake of today's conversation, to not get way too deep, I really want people to take away that the two main regions you want to remember for main regions in Mendoza are Luján de Cuyo, so this northern region, versus the Elqui Valley. And in general, the terms I use to differentiate the two, Luján de Cuyo, think of more classic traditional as both an area as well as for majority's sake of varietals that are planted there. Also generally lower elevation. When you think Elqui Valley, think kind of the new kid on the block, the new cool kid on the block. So the Elqui Valley, again, in general, has been mostly explored and expanded in the last 15 to 20 years, save for some old vines that you're getting in this area of the Elqui Valley. Another main thing you want to remember, as you go south and you go west in Mendoza, you're going up in elevation because the Andes are here now. On the other side from Chile, in Chile, the mountains are to the east, and Argentina, in Mendoza, the mountains are to the west. So this is all of the new exploration of the higher elevation vines in Argentina, which has proven to be a huge gold mine of potential that we've already seen and will continue to see into the future. So really exciting stuff going on in the Elqui Valley for sure. Sorry, this Adobe thing continuously pops up for me, so let me just get rid of it. So that is kind of the 101 on Mendoza. Again, because we get to get a little nerdy today, this is more breaking down of what all of the elevation tiers look like for the Andes mountainside of Mendoza. Argentines kind of split it into different, the Precordillera, the Cordillera Frontal, and the Cordillera Principal. They're all different grades, different soil types, different alluvial stones, different colluvial stones. So it's all really interesting to see how the different wine regions kind of fit into these different sections. This is also more of a tectonic photo of how the Andes were formed, which gives a little more visual to, again, that mountain range and the coast, the Andes, and then Argentina. This honestly is one of the coolest kind of aha moments that I feel like I've experienced with winemakers down in Argentina over the past decade or so. And that really was the use of the Winkler Index. It's a global, internationally used index that therefore kind of creates a base universal level to compare different wine regions from around the world. It compares degree days, which is essentially the amount of days that a grape needs to mature fully for harvest. So it really is affected by the amount of temperature that a region reaches in one day, accumulated over time. So in general, really hotter regions have a higher Winkler Index versus cooler regions have a lower Winkler Index. And in Argentina, the major way to get cool climate is going up into the Andes Mountains. So we'll talk a little bit more about Luca. Laura Catena's wine has a certain line called the G lot, which stands for Gualtairi. It's a vineyard area that Laura Catena and her dad pioneered in the mid-90s that sits at 5,000 feet. No one thought you could grow there in Argentina, and no one certainly thought you could grow varietals like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. But when you break down Gualtairi, which is these two images down here, you have 3 different Winkler indexes even in the region of Gualtairi, which is relatively a small region. You can drive the whole thing in, half an hour. So with that steeper incline, you have parts of that G lot that are the same as Burgundy and Champagne, which then makes kind of this aha moment of, oh my gosh, well, that makes so much more sense to plant things like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, even though you wouldn't think of that sort of parallel, just thinking Mendoza versus Champagne. So interesting kind of temperature parallels there when we're thinking about wines at elevation. Shout if there are any questions. I know that was a lot kind of diving in all at once for the maps, but I hope that was a useful overview for just Appellation 101 for both sides of the Andes. Now we're going to get into how I usually position storytelling for wine in the market for both Chile and Argentina. These are 3 different storyline buckets that fit for both countries that I've seen as the drivers of the most important press articles, kind of aha moments that wine professionals have had, as well as what these winemakers are doing in this generation to move their countries forward. So the first bucket is all about the new and the innovative. The second bucket is about the classic and the traditional, but revamped. And the third storyline is all about the ancient and the ancestral viticulture vines and winemaking that have lived in these countries for so long, but have never been really represented in the modern market. That now is story is being told, and honestly, it's one of the most exciting. So we're going to dive in a little bit to these 3 to give a little more context and see how our wines fit into these stories. So first we have the new and the innovative. What does that mean? It's kind of what we were talking about with Chile, that they're pushing their map north, south, east to west. My favorite quote is Jancis Robinson. She says that her least favorite wine map to make is the map of Chile, because every time she prints it, there's a new version or a new appellation that's popped up. That's because, again, the exploration hasn't stopped, which I think some of the most exciting wine regions in the world are ones that haven't stopped growing and haven't stopped evolving, because we're living that real story with them. So this, again, is an example for both sides of the Andes, for Argentina and Chile. I would say 2 of the brands that represent this for the Chile side are areas like Mayu, which is in the Elqui Valley, the northern valley of Chile in the desert. This was not a fine winemaking region at all up until the mid-90s, when the family behind Mayu was first to pioneer it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we see some pictures. We also have Amaina and Boya, which are from the Leda Valley of Chile, which is essentially like the Sonoma coast of Chile, directly west of Santiago. This area also was never planted up until the late 90s. So again, all relatively very recently new explorations of the map. And now Leda is one of the most prized terroirs for cool climate varietals in Chile. On the Argentine side, we have Gualtairi, which we just discussed with that higher elevation. So again, moving farther up, as well as exploring other soil types and areas that they kind of overlooked in areas of Luján, as well as the Elqui Valley. And then also for Argentina, I think so many people are saying, you know, it's only Malbec in Argentina. That is so not true. And it's really fun and dynamic to have a book that has both badass Malbecs as well as other things from Argentina to show more of a collective story of what Mendoza wine and Argentine wine is. So for photos here, just as there's a little more visual of areas like Leda. When we think coastal hills, this is literally the hills of Leda that flow down to the ocean. So this is Pinot harvest last year. And the upper left corner of the picture, you'll see the fog from the ocean coming in the morning. Once that fog lifts, that top left-hand corner is the Pacific Ocean. That is how close these vines are to the ocean. So 5 miles maximum. And it always makes me laugh because so many areas of the Sonoma coast are like 20 miles inland. Like Leda is coastal wines, true and true. These vines have the best view of the ocean of all the vines in Chile. This is also just a picture of what the Chilean coast looks like, which for me feels like that raw, rugged feeling of an area like ironically, Mendocino, California. This is just a snapshot of another side of the culture of Chile, which is seaweed and seafood harvesting. So this particular culture lives near the coast in the central and northern regions, and they harvest all the seaweed from the wild coast of Chile, bundle it up and sell it at the market, both domestically and internationally. So the life and the soul of the sea has very much an impact on everything in Chile, obviously. To go on the complete other side of the spectrum, this is the home from where Mayu is harvested. So this is the Elqui Valley. Mayu has 3 different wines, the dry Pedro Jimenez, the Sauvignon Blanc, and the Carmenere Syrah. Kind of the pillar of the brand, because it's so unique, is the dry Pedro Jimenez. This is a region that literally sits at the edge of the driest desert in the world. So like Mendoza, it needs to be irrigated by snowmelt. So nothing shows this more than this picture of green equals irrigated, not green equals not irrigated. It is a desert. You also see how clear the sky is, and that's because the Elqui Valley, because it's so arid, is also the world's most renowned place for stargazing and astronomy. So this little white building here is the actual Mayu Observatory that's on the label of the wine. And to go there and see the starry skies at night is literally a life bucket list. So I hope everyone is able to do it in their life, and I hope I get to be there with you when it happens. This is just a little more of the perspective that the PX that Mayu has is planted at 6,000 plus feet into the Andes. So we've now gone farther east into the valley, going up into the elevation. And in general, this region has been planted with vines for many years, but not for winemaking, for pisco production. So Pedro Jimenez is a varietal that has been planted for a long time, but only for pisco production. So Mayu Pedro Jimenez, being a dry still wine, was very pioneering and opened up the valley for wine production, again, only in the 90s. This is a visual of the actual grape, Pedro Jimenez. They're predominantly planted in a pergola style, so highly trellised. You see this a lot in very high sunlight, high temperature areas to keep that canopy shadow over the grapes so they don't sunburn. One of the best snacks of your life is just walking under these and snacking away at the PX. It's so good. This is also just a visual of the start of what that G-lot area looks like in Mendoza. So you can see how closer you are to the Andes Mountains. And that's the famous Tupungato volcano there. All right, so bucket number 2, we have the classic and the traditional. So what does that mean? These are really areas, varietals, and winemaking styles that we're most familiar with from Chilean Argentina. Yes, in general, that's talking about Malbec from Argentina, Carmenere from Chile, and then really across both sides of the Andes, Cabernet Sauvignon, which is a whole other topic to talk about too, because I think there's even more of a future of Cabernet Sauvignon from both sides of the Andes because of the quality of vines that they have, the quality of the wines, for literally a third to a fourth of the price you're going to find somewhere else like Napa or France. So a couple of different wines that really are emblematic of this because of their grape as well as their region. Casarena has 2 single vineyard wines, the Elqui Malbec as well as the Owens Cabernet Sauvignon. Yes, this is Luján de Cuyo. These are varietals that we know, but this is revamping those varietals that we know to another level. Elqui is harvested from the only limestone block that people have found in Luján de Cuyo, which you'll see here in this picture. Pablo's like hacking away at what feels like this concrete stone of chalk. That's what gives Elqui this very much unique savoriness and umami level in the wine, which again kind of revamps people's understanding of what a palate of Malbec can feel like. The Cabernet Sauvignon that they have are from really old Cabernet vines that are actually pergola trained, which is the only vineyard I know of this type in Mendoza for Cabernet. Traditionally, a lot of vines were planted like this in Mendoza because they were all flood irrigated vineyards because of that canal system. And in a dry, arid climate, that was a very useful way, an economical way to water your vineyards because you do it, you know, a few times a year, really soak the water in, and those roots would go low for its water source. On the Chilean side, you have areas like the Maipo Valley and the Colchagua Valley, which are more central, known predominantly for Cabernet Sauvignon and Carmenere. I would say representing the brands of Aquitania and Los Lingues for these regions and for these varietals, outstanding expressions. I just still can't believe these 2 bottles are $20 SRP. Sorry, I have an ambulance outside. And they are absolutely over deliver for their price. So for a little visual here, this is the Owens Vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon from Casarena. You can feel just the prominence of the Andes Mountains right there in front of you. Yes, these are clouds, but even above the clouds, you have the snow-capped Andes Mountains there. So you can even feel the influence of their influence of both presence, but also climate as the weather comes over from Chile. This is just a very classic image of Mendoza. The Cordón de Plata is one of the most famous peaks. Aconcagua is the highest peak in the Andes, almost at 23,000 feet, and that's farther north of Mendoza. And this is just another visual of walking under those Cabernet vines for the Owens Cabernet. You can see the little grape clusters here. These vines are over 80 years old. They've kind of developed their own clones, and obviously it's all hand harvested and pretty back-breaking work. So a lot goes into that cab bottle for Owens Cabernet. This is just a little shout out for Malbec. I think we have a lot of discussion to have about Malbec into the future. I would say mainly a question we get in the market is that, you know, a lot of buyers have palate fatigue on Malbec. And the question they ask is like, well, what's after Malbec in Argentina? Well, mainly there's two answers to that. First of all, it's not the question of what's after Malbec in Argentina, it's what's next for Malbec in Argentina. Because you wouldn't ask what's after Cabernet and Napa. You're still gonna get great Cabernet and Napa. They're not gonna rip up the Cabernet vines to explore something new. And I feel the same about Malbec in Argentina. I think Malbec's only just begun. And with this generation of winemakers, they're only doing greater and greater things with this varietal as they more understand climate and soil type that's in their backyard. Secondly, I think it's very fair to say what's outside of Malbec for Argentina, which we'll talk a little bit more about with the other wines. I think they're equally exciting stories for the wine country of Argentina. And specifically for Malbec, I mean, yes, trade might be palate fatigue because they haven't tasted recently many inspiring Malbecs, but that's our job to bring them exciting Malbecs because they exist. Simultaneously, the consumer still wants Malbec and still wants a lot of Malbec. It's the #1 imported red wine varietal to the United States. So they can't be the blockers to the consumer that wants the Malbec. Their only job is to give them good Malbec. So with our brands like La Posta that are single vineyard Malbecs that compare the same winemaking across 3 different regions that have completely different expressions, that's a huge aha moment to deliver to them. So continuing to tell that story and to recalibrate people's palates in the varietal, super important. We can have a whole nother class about that, but just wanted to give a sound bite there. This, just to go on the Chilean side, this is one image of the Los Lingus vineyard of Casa Silva in the Colchagua Valley, up against the foothills of the Andes, the most premium terroir in Chile for Carmenere, period. And that single vineyard Malbec Carmenere pound for pound is the best expression of Carmenere in the market. And I've time and time again shown that bottle to people and have their minds blown away by the quality. So amazing Carmenere to be able to work with, and it's Carmenere kind of 2.0. So the third bucket that honestly, again, we could have a full-blown class in this topic, but I would say that this third storyline has been the most inspiring for press and trade across the US and really internationally for a story in Chile and Argentina. And that's this kind of resurrection, revitalization of the ancient and the ancestral winemaking and varietals that have lived in these countries for centuries, but really has never been told until today. So there are a few different examples of wines in the bottom. And I would say one of the, there's Old Vine Malbec in Argentina. There's Old Vine Semyon, which many people have never known about. We'll talk a little bit more of that with the photos. But one of the main roots of all of this is that many people have never known the depth of history of winemaking in these countries. Many people might think, oh yeah, Chile and Argentina have been making wine since like the 1980s, of course. No, these countries have been making wine since the 1500s, because that's when the Spaniards first arrived to the Americas with grapevines for winemaking, because they were on their mission, right? They needed to make wine for mass. So the varietal they brought with them from Spain is called Listan Prieto, originally from mainland Spain, now predominantly known in the Canary Islands. They arrived to Mexico, and then on their mission, they went north to North America, into California, and planted the grape, where it's evolved to be called the mission grape after the missionaries. They went down south to Chile, and they planted the grape, and it's called País in Chile. And then over the Andes to Argentina, they planted it, and in Argentina, they call it Criolla Chica. So this vine single-handedly created the foundation of winemaking in the Americas, which again is wild that many people have never known this story. So this was the foundation of wine economy, wine culture in South America. And over time, these vineyards got very overlooked, only looked at for kind of plonk bulk wine. But because certain areas in Chile and Argentina, and especially Chile in the south where you can dry farm, these vines have been able to be preserved ever since then. And also because you've never had a huge phylloxera outbreak in these regions, especially the south of Chile, this area is home to the oldest original rootstock material of vine left on the planet, which is mind-boggling. And again, crazy how it's been so overlooked for so long, but it's because a lot of these vines started to get ripped up until winemakers went to these families who were only getting 2 cents a kilo for the oldest original rootstock pais left in the world and saying, I will pay you 8 times the amount. Please keep your vineyard. I will make wine out of this. And the amazing thing is that when you take care of these varietals, they make unbelievably delicious wine, especially with the varietal of pais. It makes almost like this Beaujolais Gamay style of wine. Chillable, super fresh red, really crunchy, great tannin, great freshness, and it like makes every wine nerd go gaga. So it's one of those really fun wines that you put on the table and it's just delicious on its own, but then it has such a layer of history behind it as well. So that's kind of the core of this ancient and ancestral story. These are storylines that no one's known about that are now being told that are really catching people's attention. So this is a snapshot here of some of the old vine Semyon that our winery Mendel works with. Again, when you only think of that bottle on a table, it's like, oh, it's white wine from Argentina. Oh, it's, you know, SRP $20 to $25. That's, you know, quote unquote expensive. Well, this is original rootstock Semyon from Bordeaux that's over 70 years old, planted in the Elqui Valley. And then additionally, Roberto de la Mota was the first one to kind of pioneer and resurrect these old vine Semyon vineyards, because Semyon, ironically, was one of the most planted varietals in Argentina up until really the 1960s, until the red wine wave really started to take over. And these vines are planted over what is now one of the most prized terroirs of the Elqui Valley, which is an area called Paraje Altamira. There's another wine from Lucca that's Lucca Paraje Altamira Malbec, single vineyard Malbec from this region. This is the first appellation in Argentina to be named just after the soil type and the climate. It's not a political boundary that makes the AVA, if you will, or the IG. It is the style of the wine and the style of the soil and the climate. And it's all characterized by these really amazing alluvial stones that have deposited there from an alluvial fan from the river, the Tunajan River. And they're all crusted with this chalk, this calcareous chalk. So literally, this is how you see the wine world evolve. I think it was 2 or 3 exams ago on the master exam for the Court of Master Soms. The question was, what is the soil of Paraje Altamira, Argentina? And the answer is calcareous crusted stones. And I wonder how many people got that right. But it's showing how much more important this conversation is becoming with terroir from Argentina. And this is another photo of that cross section. And I'm kind of hitting this rock here, showing how the chalk dust just comes right off of it. So when you do kind of a terroir tasting of wines from Paraje Altamira, you really get a sense of their taste of place. And it's very much about the tannin structure. It's a very chalky tannin structure there. Makes brilliant, brilliant wines across many varietals. They're also taking cuttings from old fine Semyon and making new vineyards. So this is an example of that there, which I think is really exciting. And now we transition over to the Chile side. So this is a picture of one of the old vine vineyard pais vineyards in Chile, specifically the Maule Valley. The Maule, Itata, and Biobío Valley is the home of all of this old vine story in Chile, which is in the south. All of them are gobelets planted, so head trellised, last documented 120 to 200 years ago, and could be plus, but it's just the last time they were documented. So it's kind of that classic gargoyle-y old vine kind of look. And this is a picture of what an actual grape cluster of Pais looks like. It's a very big cluster, loose grapes, very pink, almost a pink grape, very light color, very thin skinned. So you get that lighter, fresher Beaujolais style of wine with a lot of crunchy character and tannin structure as well. So any Beaujolais Cru drinkers out there, they go crazy for this, for these wines. And J. Bouchon is really our winery that pioneers that, has become such a leader for this movement in Chile. Just a picture of the Bouchon vineyard there. Just a side note, another kind of old vine story in Chile is Sauvignon Gris. So Casa Silva has an old vine Sauvignon Gris. This is a cousin mutation of Sauvignon Blanc. Also was planted in Bordeaux, but not as much anymore. So the grape cluster to the left is Sauvignon Blanc. The grape cluster to the right is Sauvignon Gris. It's always a fun visual to show people. So that was a lot to pack in all at once. I will just leave these 2 slides at the end because I know I can talk all day about how great Argentina and Chile is, but we are constantly accumulating all of the press quotes that come out and the press headlines that come out over the last year about both the wine side of Chile and Argentina, as well as when we were all traveling, the really intense increase of interest in traveling to these places for both adventure travel as well as food and wine travel, which was really, really inspiring to see. And I think it's only going to keep growing, specifically for the wine side. And again, I know that was all a lot. I really want to respect your time on a Monday afternoon for you guys. So please shout out either right now if you have any short questions. But my email is also on that card there. So please reach out. Here for a resource anytime.
So Lizzy, let me start off by saying, first off, that was awesome. I'm incredibly enthused and psyched to go out and start selling more of these wines once we're able to pull samples and drag a bag, right? You did an excellent job of making it simple, stupid, and easy to wrap your head around. And I know that there's information that you put together in this PowerPoint, but anything that you feel like sharing, I think I can speak for the team in saying that I would sacrifice quite a bit to be able to get a hold of that presentation. So anything you want to share, appreciate it. If you don't mind, chat open on your screen.
Yep.
A couple questions that came up. So we were talking earlier about the irrigated sections, the vineyards up in the northern part of Chile. But then there was a section of, it looked like planted vineyards that were, maybe it was just regular vegetation. Fritz had asked a question as to whether or not there were plans to irrigate the other side there, or was it just kind of like wild brush and desert, cactusy kind of stuff?
It was the picture of the Mayu Valley where the PX was planted, and you were showing that it was, yes, exactly, green on one side, brown on the other. The other side's trellised also. Is that not yet irrigated?
Great call out. So Giorgio is the winemaker for Mayu, and as with any other desert region and for winemaking, the highest currency is water. And so he had plans to plant, actually, because this is more of a coastal area of the valley, to plant some more trellising of Sauvignon Blanc as well as some Pinot Noir, and he ran out of water rights. So the trellising is all ready, but he's going to have to wait for a few more healthy winters to be able to move forward with that project. And then this area here is never going to be planted. That's just literally wild desert brush and cactus.
That kind of leads right into the question that I was asking. Hi, your presentation has been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much. But is the water supply for irrigation controlled in Chile similarly to Argentina?
Say the first part again.
Is the water supply for irrigation controlled in Chile similarly to Argentina?
Yes. So in this valley in particular is the Elqui Valley. So you have the water coming off of the Andes. It's more of a very classic V-shaped valley that you can very much kind of go east to west, versus Mendoza is much more spread out. So there's water rights in the easternmost part of the valley that's divided, and then there's actually a man-made dam in the middle, and then anything farther west from that, it's divided from the dam farther out. So all to say, it's equally as monitored there for how people get their water and how much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Lizzy, you mentioned the 3 different storylines for how you can kind of look at South America.
Yeah.
Question came in from Sarasota in regards to what storyline you feel like Bernarda fits into.
Ooh, I love the topic of Bernarda. So I would say I kind of layer it in 2 and 3. So the classic and the traditional, as well as the ancient and the ancestral, because there's sometimes that I parallel Bernarda and País. So Bernarda in Argentina and País in Chile, because they both have been seen for only bulk production wine, plonk wine, not well-made wine. But this generation have taken both varietals, paid attention to viticulture, and made outstanding expressions of these wines. And I also think that they're both wines, when made well and in a certain style, you can serve them in that chillable reds type of style. Very light body, light red fruit, very like crushable, quenching red wines. So it fits into that ancient ancestral. But I also think Bernarda is a very classical varietal, especially of Mendoza. That's been a pillar grape in a lot of blends in Mendoza, even if people never knew it. And it's also getting revamped to kind of take its own shining stage as 100% varietal wines.
Just from kind of a geeky side of things, Brian Benneker in Jacksonville asked if there's any sparkling Semyon being produced.
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that. So Semyon originally, when it was planted in one of those highest, percentage plantings in Argentina, was used for bulk white wine as well as some sparkling production. So that also is being revamped. And we work with the Reginato family. So you probably recognize the Reginato sparkling rosé of Malbec, which is an outstanding sparkling wine. Luis Reginato, who's also the winemaker for La Posta and Luca, his family, and he's resurrected an old vine Semyon vineyard and just started making sparkling wine from it these last 2 years, and it's awesome. And I only drink it in Argentina, and I'm slowly trying to get it to the United States.
So I wanted to clarify one thing that you said earlier. You were talking about the 2 single vineyard wines, the Pergola trained Cabernet
Yes.
and the Malbec. You said it's the only documented limestone in Luján de Cuyo?
Yeah, as of now. So the majority of the limestone in Mendoza is all found in the Elqui Valley. We're getting a lot of that runoff directly from the higher elevation of the Andes Mountains. Otherwise, Luján de Cuyo is a little more north and a little lower elevation. You're going to get a lot more clay and loam in general in the Luján de Cuyo area. And this is a very different type of limestone that they found in this area in Agrelo, where Casarena is. It's more of that cement block kind of limestone versus the calcareous stones that you find in Praia Altamira. Gualtalliri also has different limestone. So the Casarena team is really the pioneers of the research for it, and they're in the midst of doing that now to see kind of what geological formation happened and when to bring this sort of block down from the Andes. So real-time evolution story with that, and we'll keep everyone updated with our educational materials.
That's awesome, because I'd never heard of limestone being that far east.
Totally, I agree. Crazy.
Any thoughts on Mendoza Chardonnay just as a category? I know we spent quite a bit of time talking about Malbec, touched on Cabernet a little bit on Bernarda.
Absolutely. I think that Chardonnay has an unbelievable, with the right producers right now, you can get outstanding Chardonnay from Mendoza. And I think it's a varietal that's only going to keep growing as viticulturists and winemakers keep exploring new terroirs. And I think you have to seek out limestone, and you have to seek out higher elevation, because you're going to want cool climates, and you're going to want that sort of soil to create the quality level that you want in the vine. So I would keep a watch out for areas like Gualtairi. San Pablo is a newer viticulture region that's kind of on the other side of a little mountain set of Gualtairi. It's a little bit farther south. And just other little pockets of the Elqui Valley is where I've seen the most impressive Chardonnays. Some of the most renowned, obviously, is the Catena White Stones, White Bones. That's even from 2 different sections of just Gualtairi. So great quality with the right producers now, and I think just keep watching out for even better Chardonnay into the future.
Well, in checking through the chat log, it looks like you answered all of the questions. I guess, team, if you have questions, now would be the time to unmute and ask them out. But before I do that, I just wanted to again say thank you to Lizzy for doing this. This was incredibly informative, and even on a gnarly rainy day in Jacksonville, man, it's nice to have something to get excited about.
Oh, I so appreciate your guys' time. I know it's a lot to kind of absorb at once, but truly my intention always is to give as much information as possible that sparks all of that wine inspiration in wine professionals across the US. These are all things we love talking about, and they're all in these countries tenfold. This is only brushing the surface. And just know that the wines you have from our book touch all of these themes. It's just really having these words to talk to your buyers about, and all day long you're going to catch their attention, and they're going to be thirsty for more information, no pun intended, because they're usually never delivered this level of detail and just, again, storytelling. It takes a lot of practice, so I always encourage, like, call me if you want to refresh a certain story, or if you're like, well, what's going on here, or shoot me an email. I'm happy to help also at this point zoom in and call different buyers with you if you want to talk about certain things, and help pitches like all day long. So please use me as a resource, as well as our whole team. We're here to help you be successful, and I think the Florida market is right for it. I know the evolutions of the food and wine scenes that are going on there is really exciting. So let's do it.
So, Lizzy, one more question did pop up, and it was kind of rhetorical, but we definitely love our Florida Vine Connections team. How come we haven't had you in the Florida market yet? And when can we make that happen? Because
we can totally make that happen. I know it's been a while last year, and Fabian and I were on the track to really schedule out this year, and as you know, he's transitioned on in a great way. And so Jess is in your market now. She's awesome. And once kind of life gets a little bit back to normal, we're gonna plan some great things for Florida. And again, as things develop over this kind of chapter that we're in, let's plan some things out for the rest of the year, and even virtually in the meantime. I've been doing a lot of virtual tastings with accounts actually in this time, and they've proven really effective. So if you especially have certain on or off-prem specifically that are still selling a lot of wine to folks, and want to keep engaging with their customers, I've set up Instagram lives, Zooms, Facebook lives, and they've really been successful for driving sales before, during, and after the tasting. So happy to brainstorm those ideas in between as well.
Thanks, Lizzy. That was awesome.
Oh, of course, my total pleasure. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Lizzie. This is Jenna Opie. Anything that is virtual that you can share that I can share out with the teams, this presentation,
Yes.
anything else, I know that your website is off the charts, so thanks for that. But I know that this group especially loves all the geeky stuff. So whatever we can share with them would be very helpful. And guys, a lot of the single vineyard, the cool stuff, we do have limited stock on. So if you do have any opportunities in the future with any of this fun stuff, just keep me in the loop so we can keep you guys whole and have fun stuff to sell.
Yeah, I will definitely share out some links of some of those examples of tastings that I've done, so you can see what a Facebook Live kind of looks like also, to see how that can integrate for our worlds now.
Perfect.
Thank you, Jenna, for that. That's great.
Does anybody have any other questions? I don't see any.
I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you again, Lizzie.
You're
And
so welcome, guys.
Everybody on
Thank
the
you, Lizzie.
comments says thank you as well.
So appreciate
For
it.
being a great host.
Thanks again,
Lizzy.
Lizzy. That was awesome.
Lizzie.
Lizzie, we knew Monica was a badass, but we didn't know you yet. Nice job.
Yeah, that was great.
We're a bunch of nerds. We can't help it, you know? It is what it is.